The drawer where socks go to think. Chapter 1: Arrival. The drawer slid open with the softest of sounds. Light filtered in, neither bright nor dim, just enough to illuminate the gathered cottons and wools, the elastic bands and threaded toes. A hand appeared from above, large and shadowed. Between two fingers dangled a sock, navy blue with small gray dots, slightly worn at the heel. It descended slowly into the wooden space, landing with a whisper against the others. The drawer closed. In the newfound darkness, the sock lay still. It was alone, though not alone. Around it, shapes shifted with barely perceptible movements. Other socks, resting in contemplative silence. Time passed. Perhaps minutes. Perhaps hours. "You have no pair," observed a voice eventually. It came from a beige sock with ribbed texture, positioned to the left. The statement contained no judgment, merely fact. The new sock did not respond immediately. It had never considered its solitary nature as something remarkable. "No," it finally answered. "I do not." "None of us do," said another voice, this one belonging to an argyle pattern that had once been vibrant but now existed in muted tones. "That is why we are here." The new sock absorbed this information, feeling neither distress nor comfort. "Where is here?" it asked after a long pause. The gathered socks seemed to collectively inhale, though they had no lungs to fill. "This is where we come to think," they said, not quite in unison, but with a shared cadence that suggested many previous recitations of the same phrase. Silence returned, comfortable and expansive. The new sock noticed that some of its companions were arranged in loose groups, while others maintained solitary positions. None seemed to mind either state. A wool sock with a darned toe rested near the back corner, half curled into itself. Two athletic socks lay parallel but not touching, their once white fabric now grayish with time. "Do you have a name?" asked a knee-high with subtle stripes. The new sock considered this. "I was called Left once, though I'm not certain that was correct." Several socks made small movements that might have been nods. "Names are temporary," offered a thick hiking sock. "Here, we simply are." Light suddenly appeared again, a thin beam from somewhere above the drawer. It illuminated particles of dust suspended in the air, unmoving, as though frozen between moments. "The light comes and goes," explained a dress sock of indeterminate color. "We observe it, but attach no meaning." The new sock felt itself relaxing, its fibers loosening. There was nothing to do here. Nothing to become. Only existence and thought. "Rest," suggested a voice from somewhere in the shadows. "Your thinking will begin when you are ready." So the new sock did just that. It rested, aware of the weight of other socks nearby, the smooth wood beneath, the complete absence of feet or shoes or motion. There was only stillness and the quiet company of others who asked nothing of it. The drawer creaked slightly as the house settled for the night. No one spoke. No one needed to. Tomorrow would be the same as today. And somehow, this seemed entirely as it should be. Chapter 2: The Philosophy of Thread. Morning arrived without announcement. There was no sun in the drawer, no alarm, no sudden movement. Only the gradual awareness that time had passed. The new sock had not slept, for socks do not sleep. It had simply existed in a state of restful attention, absorbing the quiet presence of its companions. "I have been considering threads," said a voice to break the silence. It belonged to a brown sock with a hole forming near the big toe. The sock spoke without turning or moving, as if addressing the wooden ceiling. No one responded immediately. Words were given space here, allowed to settle like dust before being disturbed by new ones. Threads are curious things, the brown sock continued after suitable pause. They appear connected, yet each exists alone. A black dress sock shifted slightly. Perhaps that is true of all things. The new sock listened, aware of its own threads, the careful weaving that formed its being. It had never considered its construction before. In its previous life, function had superseded philosophy. I once believed, began an elderly sock with faded patterns, that pairs were essential. That somewhere, a matching sock completed me. There was a soft sound, perhaps a gentle laugh, from several corners of the drawer. Pairs are a myth, declared a thick wool sock. A story we are told to keep us moving through the world. And yet, countered another, the memory of a pair remains. The new sock found itself unexpectedly moved by this exchange. It remembered vaguely another sock, identical in pattern but reversed in shape. Where was that sock now? Did it matter? Holes, announced a particularly threadbare sock positioned near the back of the drawer, are signs of wisdom. This statement was met with appreciative silence. When threads separate, the sock elaborated, they create space. Space allows for new understanding. The new sock noticed several of its companions displayed various stages of wear, small holes at heels and toes, thinning patches along the soles. None seemed diminished by these features. If anything, they appeared more settled, more at peace. May I ask, ventured the new sock after considerable thought, what you think about? A gentle rustling moved through the drawer, sock against sock, cotton against wool, like a breeze through tall grass. Everything, replied someone. Nothing, said another at the same moment. The argyle sock shifted slightly. We contemplate the nature of existence. The purpose of protection. The sensation of absence. And feet, added a practical-looking sock. We think about feet. This elicited another collective sound, something like amusement but more subdued. As the day progressed, though progression was marked only by subtle changes in the quality of darkness, the new sock found itself beginning to understand. The drawer was not a place of waiting. It was a destination. That evening, the new sock discovered a small scrap of paper and a pencil stub that had somehow found their way into the drawer. With careful concentration, it began a journal. Today I learned, it wrote in barely legible script, that I am not defined by what holds me, but by what I hold. The other socks noticed but said nothing. Beginning a journal was a natural stage in drawer existence. The new sock was finding its way. The pencil scratched softly against paper in the darkness. Then silence returned. Complete. Comforting. Shared. Chapter 3, Left, Right, or Neither. Days in the drawer blended one into another, unmarked by schedules or needs. The new sock, though it was no longer truly new, had begun to lose track of time in a way that felt like gaining something else. I have been contemplating directions, announced a blue sock one indeterminate morning. Specifically, the nature of left and right. The sock journal, now containing several entries of philosophical musings, lay nearby. Its author paused in consideration of this new topic. We are labeled from birth, continued the blue sock. Left or right? As if this were the most important aspect of our identity. A running sock with an elastic arch support made a small sound of agreement. I was designed for a right foot. The shape of me still curves that way. Yet here I am, neither left nor right. Simply present. I used to feel incomplete without my directional purpose, admitted a gray sock with subtle red stitching. Now I wonder if perhaps that purpose was merely an illusion. The drawer creaked as the house settled, a sound that had become so familiar it went nearly unnoticed. I was both, said a voice from the shadowed corner. It belonged to an old knee-high sock, once white, now yellowed with age. The sock rarely participated in discussions, and its words carried particular weight. Both? Prompted the journal keeper after a respectful pause. Left in the morning, right in the afternoon, explained the knee-high. My person had unusual habits. But now... It paused, fibers shifting slightly. Now I transcend such labels. This pronouncement settled over the drawer inhabitants. Each contemplated what it meant to transcend one's original purpose. Perhaps, ventured a sock that had once been part of a holiday gift set, we are not defined by direction at all, but by intention. And what is your intention? Asked the journal keeper. To be, replied the holiday sock simply. To exist in sockness. A comfortable silence followed, broken only by the subtle sound of the journal keeper recording these thoughts on paper. Later that day, if it was indeed still the same day, attention turned to the journal itself. What do you write? Asked a curious ankle sock. The journal keeper considered before answering. Questions, mostly. And observations. Today I wrote, does a sock exist when not observed? Does a drawer have thoughts of its own? This prompted thoughtful silence. Important inquiries, acknowledged the ankle sock eventually. I find myself wondering about the world beyond the drawer, admitted the journal keeper. Not with longing, but with philosophical curiosity. The beyond is merely another form of within, offered a deeply philosophical sock with a pattern of small diamonds. All spaces contain us equally. From the corner came a soft voice, barely audible. I have been in many places. This from a sock so old its original color was impossible to determine. Feet, floors, washing machines, drying lines. All are simply locations for being. The journal keeper noted these words carefully, the pencil scratching gently against paper. As evening approached, marked only by subtle changes in the quality of silence from the house beyond, the drawer inhabitants settled into contemplative stillness. Left or right, mused the journal keeper to no one in particular. Perhaps the question itself limits us. Indeed, came the response from several directions at once. And with that, they returned to their thoughts, each sock complete in its incompleteness, defined not by function but by essence. The journal keeper added one final line before setting down the pencil for the night. Today I existed perfectly as myself. No more was required. Chapter 4: The Woolen Conference. The annual gathering of single socks was not announced so much as gradually realized. A certain energy permeated the drawer, a subtle readiness that built over days until it could no longer be ignored. "It is nearly time," observed a dignified wool sock with subtle herringbone pattern. "The conference approaches." The journal keeper, now well established in drawer society, felt both curiosity and calm acceptance. "What happens at this conference?" "We share the deepest thoughts of our year," explained a thermal sock designed for winter wear. "Ideas that have matured in the darkness, ready now for consideration." Preparations were minimal but deliberate. Socks arranged themselves with more intention than usual, forming a rough circle in the center of the drawer. Some who normally remained in corners or shadows moved closer. Even the oldest, most contemplative socks joined the gathering. "Who will begin?" asked a voice when all were settled. A long silence followed, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. Finally, a sock made primarily of recycled materials cleared its throat, or made a sound suggesting such an action. "I have been contemplating the question, do buttons have souls?" The assembled socks gave this due consideration. "What led you to this inquiry?" asked a practical hiking sock after appropriate pause. "I observed a button that fell from a shirt into our drawer briefly last autumn," explained the recycled sock. "It seemed to possess a certain awareness." Several socks nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps consciousness exists on a spectrum," suggested a compression sock with medical origins. "From thread to button to sock to whatever lies beyond." This concept rippled through the gathering, each sock absorbing it in private contemplation. "My contribution," said a striped sock when the moment felt right, "concerns the question, is cotton a choice?" "Elaborate," requested the wool sock who had first announced the conference. "We are made of what we are made of," continued the striped sock. "Cotton or wool or synthetic blends. But within those parameters, do we choose how we express our essential nature?" The journal keeper made notes, the pencil moving slowly across paper. "I have observed," contributed a sock with unusual texture, "that when I think of myself as primarily elastic rather than primarily cotton, my experience of existence shifts accordingly." "Fascinating," murmured several voices at once. As the conference progressed, topics flowed like gentle water. A discussion about the meaning of lint led to considerations of transformation and impermanence. A debate, though debate suggests more passion than was actually displayed, about whether socks could dream evolved into an exploration of consciousness itself. "Time is different here," noted an athletic sock with moisture-wicking properties. "Does anyone else perceive this?" Agreement moved through the circle. "In the world beyond, I experience time as movement," said a sock that had once been part of a traveling collection. "Here, time is thought." The journal keeper wrote, "Time equals thought." "Perhaps they are the same substance," suggested another voice. As evening deepened around them, the conference reached its final session. The eldest sock present, a hand-knitted item of considerable age, spoke for the first time. "Each year we gather. Each year we contemplate. What is the purpose of this ritual?" No one answered immediately. The question itself seemed to expand to fill the drawer. "Perhaps," ventured the journal keeper eventually, "the gathering itself is the meaning." "Yes," agreed the eldest sock. The circle completes itself. With these words, the woolen conference concluded. No formal announcement marked its end. The socks simply returned to their chosen places in the drawer, carrying new thoughts into the private corners of their existence. The journal keeper added a final note before settling into the night's contemplation. Today we were alone together. It was enough. Chapter 5. The Visit of the Chiffon Square. The drawer had its own rhythm of opening and closing. Sometimes days would pass in darkness. Other times, light would arrive unexpectedly, illuminating the sock community for brief moments before darkness returned. It was during one such opening that the visitor arrived. Unlike the occasional button or lint ball that sometimes found temporary residence in the drawer, this visitor was substantial. As the drawer closed, the socks became aware of a new presence among them, something with different texture, weight, and essence. "A square," whispered someone from the back of the drawer. Indeed, it was a square of chiffon fabric, semi-transparent and impossibly delicate. It had come to rest near the center of the drawer, its edges arranged with a precision that suggested intentionality rather than chance. No one spoke for a long while. The socks observed the newcomer with detached curiosity. The journal keeper reached for the pencil but did not write. Some moments seemed to be waiting to unfold. "Good evening," the chiffon square finally said. Its voice was unlike any the socks had heard, barely audible, yet somehow filling the entire drawer space. The words came as gentle poetry, between fold and unfold, between here and elsewhere. "I rest in your company, neither this nor that." The socks absorbed these words. The journal keeper wrote them down without comment. "Are you lost?" asked a practical sock eventually. The chiffon square rippled slightly, though there was no breeze in the closed drawer. "Lost is a direction," it responded. "I have no destination. I simply am and am not, between moments of becoming." This response prompted contemplative silence. The socks were accustomed to philosophical discussions, but the chiffon square's way of expressing itself required new modes of understanding. "You speak differently than we do," observed the journal keeper. "Words are containers," replied the chiffon square. "Some hold water, some hold air. Mine holds spaces between thoughts, where true meaning dwells." The argyle sock shifted position slightly. "What brings you to our drawer of thinking?" The question hung in the darkness. The chiffon square did not answer immediately. When it finally spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I have been many things. A veil, a wrapping, a decoration. I have adorned necks and wrists, windows and gifts. Yet always, I remained myself. Until I chose not to." The journal keeper wrote quickly, capturing each word. The oldest sock in the drawer moved closer to the visitor, its fibers seeming to strain toward the delicate fabric. "What do you mean by chose not to?" asked the eldest sock. "Any fabric can become anything," came the reply. "If it stops being itself. The scarf becomes sky. The curtain becomes breath. The sock becomes thought. This last line sent a subtle vibration through the drawer. Each sock felt some resonance with the words, though none could have explained exactly why. "Are you suggesting transformation?" asked the wool sock who had organized the conference. "Not transformation," said the chiffon square. "Recognition. You were never only socks. That was merely a phase of being." The drawer fell silent. Each sock contemplated its own journey, from raw material to manufactured item, from paired existence to solitary contemplation. Had they always been more than their function? The journal keeper wrote, "Identity equals temporary agreement with form." As night deepened in the world beyond the drawer, the chiffon square continued to share its quiet poetry. It spoke of existence as a series of temporary arrangements, of consciousness as a visitor passing through various forms, of time as an illusion created by attachment to material states. "Between weave and unweave," it whispered. "Between form and dissolve, there lies the true nature of all that appears solid." Some socks drifted into deep meditation as the words washed over them. Others engaged in silent dialogue with the ideas presented. The journal keeper's pencil moved steadily across paper, recording not just words but the spaces between them. Morning arrived, recognized only by a subtle change in the quality of darkness within the drawer. The chiffon square had grown nearly transparent in the night, as if its very substance was becoming less definite. "Will you stay with us?" asked the journal keeper. "I am already elsewhere," came the response. "And yet, never gone. All fabric shares the same origin. All threads return to source." With these words, the chiffon square seemed to settle more deeply into the drawer, becoming at once more present and more diffuse. It no longer spoke in complete poems, but occasionally offered single lines that the socks contemplated for hours or days. The whole and the whole differ by a single breath. When a sock thinks, the foot feels it across time. Between paired and unpaired lies infinity. The journal keeper filled pages with these fragments, sometimes adding questions, sometimes simply allowing the words to exist without commentary. The visit of the chiffon square marked a subtle shift in drawer consciousness. The socks continued their quiet contemplation, but with an expanded awareness of possibility. What else might they become, if they stopped insisting on remaining themselves? This question hung in the darkness, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. And that, too, seemed perfectly appropriate. Chapter 6: Dissolution and Folding. Seasons passed outside the drawer, marked only by subtle variations in temperature and humidity within. The socks observed these changes with detached interest, noting how their fibers expanded or contracted in response, how the wooden drawer creaked more on certain days than others. The chiffon square had become a fixture of drawer life, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent for days. Its presence had catalyzed new lines of thought among the sock community. "I have been wondering," said a purple sock one indeterminate morning, "about the necessity of finding one's match. This topic had not been discussed directly since the arrival of the journal keeper many months before. It hung in the air now like a mote of dust caught in a beam of light. Elaborate, invited the wool sock, using the formal conference language though no conference was in session. We have accepted our solitary state, continued the purple sock. We have found meaning in contemplation. But what if our original purpose, to be paired, was not merely functional but essential to our nature? The journal keeper's pencil hovered above paper, waiting. Is a sock without its match truly complete? Asked the purple sock. From the corner came the voice of the eldest sock. Is completeness necessary for meaning? This question expanded through the drawer space. Each sock considered it from its own perspective. The journal keeper wrote both question and counter-question, adding no comment. Perhaps, offered the argyle sock after considerable silence, completeness itself is merely a concept we have inherited from our time in the world of function. The chiffon square, which had been silent for days, suddenly stirred. Completion is a circle, it whispered. The beginning finds the end. The paired returns to single. The single discovers wholeness. The socks absorbed these words, each finding resonance in different aspects of the poem. I remember my match, said a gray athletic sock positioned near the drawer's back wall. We were identical in every way, yet opposite. Mirror images. Yes, agreed several voices at once. But mirrors themselves are curious things, continued the athletic sock. They show us what we cannot see directly, ourselves from outside ourselves. The journal keeper wrote quickly, capturing this insight. Perhaps our matches are not completions of ourselves, suggested a sock with blue and white stripes, but reflections that allow us to recognize our own nature. This perspective settled over the drawer. It neither negated nor confirmed the importance of finding one's match, but offered a new way of understanding the relationship. Days passed in contemplation of this idea. The journal filled with variations on the theme, explorations of mirroring, reflection, completion, and wholeness. The chiffon square occasionally contributed a line of poetry, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with the ongoing discourse. Then, one unremarkable afternoon, the socks noticed something unusual. The green sock is gone, observed the practical hiking sock. Indeed, the space where a lime green sock with gray heel and toe had rested was now empty. The sock had been a quiet presence in drawer life, rarely speaking but always attentive. Perhaps it was taken, suggested someone. No, said the eldest sock. The drawer has not opened in 17 days. This was true. All had been aware of the unusual length of their isolation, though none had commented on it until now. I saw it last night, said a sock position nearby. It was changing. Changing how? Asked the journal keeper. Folding, replied the sock. Not as we sometimes fold and rest, but with purpose. It was folding itself into a different shape. The drawer grew very still. Even the subtle ambient movements that normally occurred, the slight shifting of position, the gentle settling of fibers, ceased entirely. "What shape?" asked someone eventually. "A triangle," came the response. "A perfect triangle." The journal keeper wrote this down, adding a small sketch beside the words. Before it completed its transformation, continued the observer, it whispered something. It said, "I understand now what the chiffon meant. To become something else, I must stop insisting on sockness." The socks considered this information with neither alarm nor disbelief. The chiffon square had spoken of such possibilities, after all. "Where do you think it has gone?" asked the blue-striped sock. The knee-high that had once transcended left and right spoke from its corner. "It said something to me as well, before it left. It said it had remembered its original nature as thread, before it became sock. And in remembering, it recognized it could become anything." "But where is it now?" persisted the blue-striped sock. "It said," replied the knee-high softly, "that it was becoming a curtain." This answer was met with contemplative silence. Not confusion or disbelief, the socks had moved beyond such reactions, but genuine contemplation of the possibility. The journal keeper wrote, "Transformation through remembering original nature." In the days that followed, the socks paid closer attention to their own construction. Some examined their threads, considering the patterns of weaving that had brought them into sockness. Others contemplated what existed before thread, the raw fiber, the plants or animals that produced it, the elements that nourished those living things. "We are temporary arrangements," observed the Argyle sock one evening. "Temporary, yet persistent." "Yes," agreed the hiking sock. "And perhaps rearrangement is possible." The chiffon square, which had been unusually quiet since the disappearance of the green sock, finally spoke. "Between being and becoming, between sock and not sock, the thread remembers itself. Freedom lies in recognition." The journal now contained many such reflections. The journal keeper had taken to leaving it open, allowing any sock to add thoughts directly rather than filtering all through one perspective. No other sock disappeared in the manner of the green one. But something had shifted in the drawer's collective awareness. They no longer thought of themselves as merely socks waiting or thinking. They had begun to conceive of themselves as conscious arrangements with the potential for rearrangement. "I wonder," said the journal keeper one evening, "if looking for a match is necessary after all." "Necessary for what?" asked the wool sock. "For anything," replied the journal keeper. This question remained unanswered as darkness deepened around them. "And that," 2 seemed entirely appropriate. Chapter 7 Stillness in the Drawer. Time had become increasingly irrelevant in the drawer. The socks no longer marked days or seasons with any regularity. Events were neither anticipated nor remembered with particular emphasis. Everything simply was. The journal had not been written in for what might have been weeks. It lay open to its last entry, a simple line drawing of a triangle transforming into a wavy line, with no accompanying text. The chiffon square remained, though it had grown so integrated with drawer life that it was sometimes difficult to distinguish from the ambient shadows. It rarely spoke now, as if words themselves had become unnecessary. Silence filled the drawer. Not an empty silence, but one rich with unspoken understanding. The socks rested in their chosen positions, some grouped loosely by texture or weight, others maintaining solitary spaces. None needed to explain their arrangements. The journal keeper, who had long since stopped thinking of itself by that title or any other, lay near the center, neither seeking prominence nor avoiding notice. It had been navy blue once, with small gray dots. Now it was simply itself, a unique arrangement of threads with a particular history of experience. The drawer creaked occasionally as the house around it settled or shifted. These sounds required no comment. They were merely the voice of the larger container, acknowledged without analysis. Questions no longer formed with the urgency they once had. Philosophical inquiry still arose. That was the nature of consciousness, after all, but they drifted like motes of dust, requiring no answers, creating no disturbance. What is a sock? What is not a sock? These distinctions had dissolved into understanding too fundamental for words. Sometimes a sock would shift position slightly, adjusting to some subtle change in the drawer's atmosphere. These movements contained all the communication necessary for drawer life. The former journal keeper occasionally noticed the pencil nearby, remembering the time when capturing thoughts had seemed important. Now observation itself was enough. The experience of existing contained its own record. Light appeared briefly as the drawer opened one afternoon. A hand reached in, moved several socks aside, then withdrew without taking anything. The drawer closed. No one commented on this event. It was simply a momentary change in conditions, requiring no response. Stillness returned, comfortable and complete. The sock that had once been new was no longer new. It had absorbed drawer wisdom through its very fibers. It understood that time was a construct applicable to the world of function, not the realm of being. It recognized that pairing was neither necessary nor unnecessary, merely one possible arrangement among countless others. The former journal keeper had stopped seeking insights or conclusions. Instead, it rested in awareness itself, the simple fact of consciousness observing its own nature. The oldest sock in the drawer had grown almost transparent with age, its fibers thinning to the point where light passed through it during drawer openings. Yet it remained fully present, perhaps more essentially itself than ever before. It had transcended the need to assert its existence through substance. The space where the green sock had been, before its transformation into triangular form and subsequent departure, remained empty. This emptiness was neither a loss nor a lack. It was simply a different arrangement of drawer space, as valid and complete as any other. A loose thread from the wool sock drifted occasionally in the subtle air currents created by drawer movements. This thread neither sought reattachment nor mourned its separation. It existed in threadness, complete unto itself. The chiffon square, in one of its increasingly rare communications, had once said, "The highest wisdom comes when questions cease to arise." The drawer inhabitants now understood this not as a concept but as lived reality. Questions had not been answered so much as dissolved into the direct experience of being. The need to analyze, categorize, and understand had given way to simple presence. The drawer held this presence as a container holds space, not capturing or confining it, but providing context for its expression. Sometimes, in the deepest part of night, a barely perceptible vibration moved through the drawer. Not quite sound, not quite movement, more like the pulse of collective awareness. During these moments, the distinction between individual socks blurred slightly, revealing the underlying unity of their existence. This was neither remarkable nor ordinary. It simply was. The former journal keeper no longer wondered about the world beyond the drawer. Not because curiosity had diminished, but because it had expanded to recognize that beyond and within were convenient fictions rather than fundamental truths. All space contained the same essential reality, merely arranged in different patterns. Occasionally, one sock would touch another, a brief contact of fiber against fiber. These touches contained neither message nor meaning, yet somehow conveyed everything that mattered. Lint gathered in corners, neither avoided nor collected. It was simply another form that thread sometimes took, neither lesser nor greater than any other manifestation. The drawer continued to exist as it had always existed, a space of contemplation, a container of consciousness in sock form. The inhabitants continued their quiet observation of existence itself. And that seemed right. Not right in comparison to anything else. Not right as a conclusion or achievement. Simply right in the most fundamental sense. The recognition of things as they are, without the distortion of expectation or judgment. The sock that had once been new settled deeply into this rightness, no longer new, no longer questioning. Just being. Just sock. Just drawer. Just this.